All right, for his analysis of that news poll and plenty more, let's bring in the national editor of the Australian newspaper, Mr. Dennis Shanahan, who features heavily in tomorrow night's documentary, I might add. He joins me now from the south coast of New South Wales. Dennis, lots of speculation. The PM's going to call the election at the end of the week, but let's be honest, for all intents and purposes, the campaign's absolutely already underway. Let's get your analysis on those news poll numbers. Coalition's primary up 1 point to 36%. Labor's shot down by 3 points, down to 38%. Still could win, but also in these numbers, a quarter of the electorate are parking their votes for now away from the two majors, are parking with Greens, One Nation, partly Palmer. The Ipsos poll, the Australian Financial Review, pretty much the same. What this tells me, looking at those numbers, is a big block of undecideds, a big block of party votes potentially that could be with the two majors sitting with the others. Now, if Labor gets them, they're over the line. If the Liberal Party, the coalition, gets them, well, Scott Morrison's back in his job. So this election's very much up for grabs on the back of just the undecideds alone. What do you think?
Well, that's right, Peter. Look, first of all, it's immaterial whether it's May 14 or May 21, and the election will be called between April 7 and April 10. So it really doesn't matter. The election campaign is underway. We've got Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese both campaigning. What these polls, both the Newspoll and Ipsos, show is that with both parties on a primary vote of less than 40%, on this poll, these polls, what we're looking at is a hung parliament, because neither side can win in their own right on 40%. So that's the most basic point out of these polls, is that we are looking at, as the campaign starts, both sides being less than 40% on primary vote. Now, I think the other interesting thing about the poll is that what we've actually seen here is not a reaction to the budget. Budgets, they can do great harm. Rarely do they do great good in the polls. But what we've actually seen here, I think, is a building anti-Anthony Albanese sentiment that's been running for a good 2 months since Scott Morrison decided to go negative on Anthony Albanese. And now that the campaign has started, now that Anthony Albanese has been asked to give a budget and reply speech where he's actually been asked to say, OK, what are you going to do? He's since then had to say, oh, we're not going to put up taxes. We're only going to put up multinational taxes. The sort of basically the rubber's hit the road here. And I think what you see in the news poll, a drop of 3% in Labor's primary vote, a small rise in a 1 point within the margin of error for the coalition. But when you take these trends together, what you may be seeing is the fact that Labor has peaked and peaked too early, that the coalition is starting to come out of a trough, and so is Scott Morrison. Now, in 2004, John Howard and Mark Latham were on level on preferred Prime Minister. Mark Latham never actually overtook John Howard as preferred Prime Minister, and although Mark Latham was very much considered the front runner, it was, of course, John Howard who won. Now, I'm not saying that the coalition's in any great shape here. Obviously, Labor is better off. But this poll shows that Anthony Albanese is getting a lot more questions asked about him. This is an anti-Labor, not plus budget, a budget neutral poll. And I think that we could be seeing some beginning trends, and that makes it so much important whether Scott Morrison calls a 5-week or 6-week campaign.
Yeah, just on that point, so the heat hasn't even started for the opposition leader, and I've been on 2 big opposition leader campaigns, 2010 and 2013. And interestingly, if you look at John Howard and Tony Abbott, before they eventually won from opposition to government, both of them had a turn at an election campaign before the one they eventually won. So you're hardened up, you learn the battle game, you understand the pressure. But you think you've had pressure until you're the opposition leader in a campaign where people are thinking you might win. Bill Shorten had 2 cracks at it and failed. This is Albanese's first time to really feel the heat. I don't think he's felt it at all over the last 3 years. So until he's in the campaign, you can be told how tough it is, but let me tell you, it gets tough. This will be where the pressure is on the Labor leader. And if the Prime Minister's brave enough to go long, and I recommend he goes long, he should go as long as he can and put as much pressure on this bloke as he can because the PM is behind. That's going to, I think Australians will focus on Albanese and make their judgment. Big hesitation now, but make their judgment. Is he up to the job or not? And that's where I think, Dennis, that the small target strategy has to fall away, doesn't it?
Well, this is the problem of a small target strategy. Now, I think I've said before on this program, Peter, where John Howard was successful with a small target strategy in 1996. But unlike Anthony Albanese, he had been around for a very long time. He had been, as you say, opposition leader and lost an election. Remember, Gough Whitlam lost an election before he won. Bill Shorten had 2 cracks and didn't get the second. Kevin Rudd had the first one, fine. Tony Abbott had 2 cracks. Now, I think that what we're looking at here is that John Howard, as a small target on policy in 1996, was very different to the character assessment that people are making of Anthony Albanese in 2022, because everyone knew what John Howard stood for. He'd been treasurer. He'd been leader of the opposition. All his positions on IR and everything else were very well known. Whereas for Anthony Albanese, who's had a small target strategy, still has a small target strategy, his budget speech really gave us nothing about what he intended to do economically, and yet he is asking people to elect him and they still don't know who he is. Now, there's 8 or 9 weeks to go, and so this is a very dangerous period for Anthony Albanese and Labor, and this is what this poll today demonstrates. There could be a loss of momentum for Labor at the worst possible time. Now, that may not happen.
Dennis,
this poll suggests that.
I'm going to have to wrap up, but I want to get a quick comment if I can. These allegations the Prime Minister is somehow racist, they surfaced from a pre-selection many years ago in the seat of Cook. A guy called Michael Toke is involved. He was the guy that Scott Morrison was running against at the time. This is yet another character assassination of the Prime Minister. Are people waking up to this game, do you think?
Oh, look, there's been a lot of talk about pre-selections and all sorts of things over the years involving the Prime Minister and a whole range of other people. But I think that what we have to see at the moment is we've got a whole season of pre-selection bitterness. Some people who were very good in their jobs have failed, and now what we're seeing is a whole range and a new woke agenda where people can make a claim, get a headline and work for it. Look, we've had these pre-selection battles, disappointments and bitter recriminations for years. Never before have they had the runway that they've now got, and that's what we're seeing now.